Hello Void and all who inhabit it, it's me, and today we are focusing on a special interest. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, is a party-based role-playing game and the 2004 sequel to the widely acclaimed Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Set nearly 4,000 years before the cinematic universe, you play as a former Jedi Knight, exiled from the Order after the events of a war. Pulled back into the known regions of space, you are tasked with helping the Republic and splintered Jedi Order to bring stability to the galaxy. Canonically, back when the Star Wars canon was a thing, the Jedi exile was light-sided, so I'm going with that read of the story, but this is a role-playing game. If you want to be a complete hellspawn, you can do that. And in fact, the dark side version of this scene is really interesting as well. But again, we're just focusing on the light side version. Also, your player lost their connection to the Force before the start of the game and slowly recovers it over the course of, not slowly, it's like immediately, but you recover it over the course of the game, and that's also important for the plot. If you enjoyed the questioning of the Jedi institution that Rian Johnson started doing in episode 8, you would really enjoy this game, but especially the character Kreia. The first of the Jedi Exile's companions, Kreia is a mysterious woman who finds the player before the start of the game for reasons that become clearer as the story unfolds. While she is introduced as a mentor figure for the Exile, she spends a lot of time manipulating crew members behind the player's back, setting up pieces for an inevitable larger goal. Although she is deceptive about her desires, Kreia is unashamed in her willingness to use whoever, however, to get what she wants. And what she ultimately wants is to stop the disruption of the galaxy by removing that which drives the Jedi and the Sith, their connection to the Force. Now, unlike focusing on a quest to retrieve a specific number of enchanted items in order to create an enhanced tool that will allow for the altering of said reality, the mechanics of how Kreia wants to do this don't really matter. It's more so the impact of her goal and the potential of it as seen in you, the main character, that drives her throughout the story. Her hidden intentions start to become clear in this scene that happens late in the game. After finding the remaining members of the Jedi Council, the Exile travels to the ruined temple on Dantooine to meet them. The Council then reveals that they exiled the protagonist because she changed after the war, and they were afraid that she would in turn change them. The Council Masters then have a really good narrative explanation for the companion influence game mechanic and explain that the protagonist's ability to create force bonds with any and everybody is actually extremely unnatural and dangerous. So, the best course of action, of course, is to remove her connection to the Force, which might kill her, but it didn't last time, so why not? Enter Kreia, who busts in like the Kool-Aid Man and force pushes the Jedi Masters back before launching into a monologue.
She has brought truth, and you condemn it. The arrogance.
Before getting into the whole drag, we have to start with just the setup of this scene, being reflective of the moral questioning Kreia introduces and represents. Your main objective up until this point has been to find the Jedi Masters so that they can deal with a brewing evil on the fringes of the galaxy. When you finally achieve this, they tell you that everything you did to maintain a sense of good, everything you did to try and find and save them was actually dark-sided and against everything they stand for. The person who's been trying to convince you this whole time that this Jedi thing is a ripe crock of shit is the one who swoops in to stop you from being punished. Kreia not only saving you, but condemning the Jedi Council in the process shatters any remaining illusion that there is a clear set of good and evil that you should try and hold yourself to. Which may sound like the pull of the dark side, but Kreia doesn't want you to be a Sith either. She pushes you into the space of gray for the majority of the game, encouraging you to make the choices that she perceives as the most beneficial or the most efficient, irrespective of side. And she's trying to push the council to do that as well.
How could you ever hope to know the threat you face when you have never walked in the dark places of the galaxy, faced war and death on such a scale? If you had traveled far enough, rather than waiting for the echo to reach you, perhaps you would have seen it for what it was.
It's one thing when Kreia is judging you for making choices she perceives as being based in flawed dogma. It's another when she's facing down the remaining Jedi of the galaxy and calling them a bunch of spineless cows for being unwilling to take a step away from ideology, if you would, for just a moment, and dip your toe into the dark side to learn something. It might help you out. But in both instances, her argument is the same. Why have this power, this access, this ability to understand the galaxy if you are not going to use it in its totality? This moment in the temple on Dantooine is the first of two scenes Kreia has with Jedi Masters where she picks at the weakness of them being so bound to a title, to a singular set of teachings, that it ultimately breaks them. But I think this one is harder to stomach, to be confronted with, because it doesn't feel wrong. Her confrontation of the Jedi Council does not feel wrong. Challenging, unyielding commitments to dogma is top 2 on Kreia's list of motivation, and it's not number 2. And in few places is there more concentrated amount of rule followers than the Jedi Council. So it makes sense that when these two bodies meet, there is an inevitable crash. But it is uncomfortable to realize as it is happening how correct, absolutely right Kreia is in condemning the entire Jedi Order. If you're like me and you started the game thinking that the Jedi are the good guys, this scene asks, are they really? Do they actually consistently make good decisions? Which, granted, this question is lobbed a couple of times throughout the game, but to have it pop up right after the Jedi Council tried some same short-sighted, single-minded bullshit with you, it hits different.
Did you never wonder how Revan corrupted so many of the Jedi, so much of the Republic, so quickly? The Mandalorian Wars were a series of massacres that masked another war, a war of conversion.
The Mandalorian Wars she mentions were a series of conflicts that happened before the game in which the Mandalorians, yes, those ones, taking inspiration from both Lara Croft and Megan Thee Stallion, ran through the Republic, snatching up multiple planets. The Republic, low-key as usual, needed help, and they reached out to the Jedi Council, who in return said, who all gonna be there? When the Sith were not on the list, the Jedi Council said, good luck and Godspeed. The Jedi are not good guys. They are peacekeepers. And the peace they are specifically keeping is that of a balance in the Force. If that is not in peril, they are very much, girl, what does any of this have to do with me? You can see how that might be an issue, both for the Republic that's getting mollywopped and for the Jedi Council that continues to make the same mistakes because of an unwillingness to do anything different from what is listed in the rulebook. That tunnel vision is exactly what Kreia is fighting against. Kreia isn't the first Jedi to become a Sith. She's not even the first Jedi to become a Sith to then give up being a Sith. But while most of those other people kept to an ideology, Kreia has been deeply impacted by the rejection of both sides. She no longer wants to find a way to fit into this binary. But on top of this, her experience has provided her an understanding that could help reform the Jedi Council and the Jedi Order, but the Council refuses to hear her out, and it really boils her piss. It's also important that in this scene, Kreia is dragging the Jedi Council specifically, not just because it reveals her own motivation, but because of the connection between the player character's past and Kreia's end goal. Of the Jedi that did eventually leave to fight in the Mandalorian Wars, the only one who returns is exiled. expeditiously. The player character stands out for seeking atonement, but again, Kreia, who has been betrayed and tossed aside twice over, knows to stop seeking redemption. Instead, she turns to ask, why do these factions always kick out those who don't fit rather than seeking to understand them? And what she finds is that the issue isn't a matter of individual willpower. Dark Jedi and failed Sith alike are often described as being weak, easily swayed, driven by temptation, but Kreia shows us that it is not the weakness of the individual that causes them to fall, but that of the institution and its inability to adapt. So, get rid of the institution, or at least that which fuels it.
Culminating in a final atrocity that no Jedi could walk away from. Save one. And that is what I sought to understand. How one could turn away from such power, give up the Force, and still live. But I see what happened now. It is because you were afraid.
While the Jedi Council fears the exile's ability to exist after being deprived of the Force, Kreia is fascinated by how she was able to survive being cut off. Because Kreia wants to use the exile as a tool to deprive the entire galaxy of its connection to the Force, and she has since they met. Actually, they met because Kreia wanted to do this, sought her out, and kidnapped her from a ship. This becomes clear in her big evil speech at the end of the game, but in this scene, we start to see what Kreia's awe towards the exile means outside of just wanting to help the Jedi exile as an individual. Kreia has been shown manipulating other characters' minds, hiding information, secretly plotting the whole game. But it's here we start to get a glimpse of the scale of what she wants to do. And it's terrifying because she's kind of onto something. But if we accept that, what does it mean about everything we've been told with regards to how morality functions in this universe? Kreia's admiration of the exile also functions in contrast to the council, who repeatedly calls her a wound and believes that there is only one negative outcome if the exile is to continue to live as a Force user. The only person advocating for you in this moment is someone who believes that you need to understand the darkness as well as the light in order to be a upstanding Force user of society, in order to truly understand the galaxy and do something that can be useful. And again, if you were buying into the dichotomy of Jedi equals light equals good and Sith equals dark equals bad, how can that be true? How can you hold space for both in a universe that says you cannot? When Kreia says you were afraid, this in part speaks to the Jedi exile's lack of options at the end of the war. The exile returned to the council because the Jedi who left to fight were all turning towards darkness. And so there were two options: become a Sith like everybody else, or go back to the Jedi and do what you've always done, which you didn't agree with because that's why you left in the first place. Kreia believes that there is another option available, and her identifying your character's fear highlights another function of her role in the story, which is to push the player past fear and towards action. The first time I played this game, I was 13 and had never played anything like it. A choice-based story with a companion system and turn-based fighting. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. So when I met Kreia early in the game, and you meet her extremely early, she's in the second room you walk into, I decided to listen to everything she had to say. If I questioned any decision, I would pick the option that she was arguing for, even when I disagreed, because I figured she must know something that I just don't. And then there was a scene between Kreia and Atton, who is another companion, in which he outright calls her a Sith, or something. I think it's the scene on Paragus when he's in the cage. Regardless, that shifted my understanding of Kreia in my mind of like, oh, she's on the other side. I want to play light side and she's dark side, so I'm just not going to listen to her. It was easy to then like renounce everything that she said and totally disregard her opinions. In my first run of the game, I was buying into the ideological binary that Kreia spends the entire narrative trying to push you away from. I was afraid of making the wrong choice or doing something that would push me in the opposite direction, and that fueled my decisions more than what I actually wanted to do or the type of story I was trying to build for my character. But the Jedi Master confrontation scene shattered my understanding of Kreia and the Council and my character. I wanted to look at the light side version of this scene, not just because it's the no longer canonically canon version, but also because to have gotten this far, you would have had to buy into some of what the Jedi Masters were slinging. And especially if that included viewing Kreia as untrustworthy or less aligned with your own ideals of what you wanted for your gameplay, this scene feels like a gut punch. The first time playing through pushed me deeper into my fear of making the wrong choice because, like the Council, I didn't want to shift my understanding and consider where Kreia was right in condemning and questioning a really rigid system of morality. Replaying the game helped me understand that the point was never to be Jedi or Sith and lean into that as heavily as possible, but to find a path outside of the limits. Which is a shame because the mechanics of the game literally won't let you access a major event needed for completion unless you're heavily light or dark. But ignoring that, you were afraid speaks to a fear of doing something different, of finding another way, of rejecting a binary. There are more options than absolute good and absolute evil. There are better options than those too, but you can't find them if you're so afraid of falling to one side or the other that you're unwilling to explore. Throughout her speech, Kreia is naming that the fear of learning a different perspective limits our behavior, and as a result, there is a need to reject that fear if we truly hope to achieve balance. You can't make a decision that's in your best interest if you're unwilling to consider all the options available to you. You cannot exist as an individual if you are stuck as an agent for one side or another. Underneath the condemnation of the institutions, that's the message Kreia wants to leave the player with. We start towards that message with this confirmation that while we may have been afraid in the past, there's nothing to fear in who we have been, what we have done, or the things we have seen. It's very Queen of Swords, very Tiffany after being yelled at by Tyra. I've learned from this experience, good or bad. Instead of trying to deny or avoid, I have collected information, and I am better for having done so. And you could have been too.
As you would pass judgment on her, I have come to pass judgment on you all. Do you wish to feel the teachings born of the Mandalorian wars, of all tragedies that scream across the galaxy?
Kreia finishes her speech, and this scene ends with her killing the remnants of the Jedi Council before fleeing the planet. Well, not just kills them, she leaves them as forceless husks. And she does this both out of protection for the player and out of her own desire to see her plan carried through. She wanted the Jedi Council to learn the error of their ways. It's hard to tell when Kreia loves you because she can use you and when she's using you because she loves you, but that murkiness in her morality and the same cloudiness she encourages in us is exactly what makes her a compelling and interesting antagonist. Yeah, I kind of cheated. She's more so an antagonist than a villain, but I will say this is the scene that switches her from one to the other. Just to make this a little clearer, I think this scene switches Kreia from an antagonist to a villain, not because of what she does, but because of what she has to do moving forward. Not to bring up the dark side version of this scene again, but in that version, Kreia tells you that she is disappointed in you, that you failed her, because the point was never to kill the Jedis off, it was to show them that they are wrong, right? In the light side version, she gets a chance to show them that they are wrong, and they still don't change their minds, and that's when she realizes, oh, I gotta just kill y'all off. Like, that's the solution. We just have to start back from the beginning. And so from this point moving forward, her trajectory changes to making you the person who will start something new. And in order for that to happen, she recognizes that she has to become the villain in your story. And that starts here. And it's more solidified in the following scene with Atris. But in this scene, Kreia switches to becoming someone who is trying to protect you, to becoming someone who is trying to just push you. And that's what like the final act of the game is about. For the bulk of the game, Kreia sees the player as a weapon to hone for her own use, and she sets up many pieces that undermine that which you are trying to maintain in benefit to her own end goal. She's working against you, but she's not actively trying to harm you. Then this scene happens, and there's a layered shift in Kreia's character. Her plan starts to come to light as it begins to unravel. In this, we get to see more of who she is and what it is that she wants, and in turn, she has it confirmed that she cannot just recreate what was essentially the exile's trauma response. Even if she could, it's not enough to disconnect the Jedi and the Sith from the Force. Their mentalities have to be eradicated. This means Kreia's plan will not succeed as initially intended, but it's already in motion, so something has to shift. At this point, the plot pivots, and Kreia becomes the big bad villain that we're after, but she makes sure to initiate that pivot by giving one strong poke at our ideas of morality and ideology and undying devotion to institutions. It's uncomfortable to acknowledge our own short-sightedness, but we have to if we hope to move past it, and you should want to do that, even if the person who has you realize is your enemy in the end. If you made it to the end, thank you for making it to the end. I did this whole thing and wasn't recording, so hello from take 2. Have you played this game before? What do you think of Kreia or the council? Anyone at all? I, again, really didn't like Kreia the first time I played. And I think part of that was like also just being 13. But she's such a good, like such a strong, compelling, like, uncomfortable character. Like, I think if you have like a really rigid idea of black and white, that character forces you to think outside of that, baby girl, whether you want to or not. There's a really dope scene with Atris and Kreia right after this one that I was thinking about looking at because it's a great distillation of who both those characters are, and they're both kind of villains at the end of the day, or antagonists at the end of the day. But when I think about Kreia, I think of her unlimited powering the Jedi Council to smithereens, so I had to do this one. There's also a 2-hour-long YouTube video out there of Kreia. I haven't watched it, and I didn't want to watch it before doing this, but I suspect if you want to know more about this character and her role in the story, you should go watch that. It has like 7 million views or something. I was like, how have I never seen this? But hey, I don't know. The universe, the algorithm works in mysterious ways. If you are a regular to this rambly part of my videos, you will know that last time I said that this video would be long. It clearly is not. But I saw this playlist going around and my special interest was flaring up. So I wanted to do this quick little ting. Hopefully it's quick. I'll be back on my bullshit next week with something very long, hopefully with some art on the wall. You know, you see we got a new setup, got more doors, and Baskin Robbins got flavors. But yeah. We're back, hopefully, on a regularly-ish schedule. That's all I got. Let me know your thoughts below. Until next time, stay safe. I'll see you in the next echo chamber.